Targeting pillars of support is a strategy that's been key to defeating authoritarian regimes all over the world, and it doesn't require winning over everyone or waiting for the perfect moment. No authoritarian regime stands on its own. It depends on cooperation from pillars like business leaders, religious groups, civil servants, the media, police and military, and teachers, scientists, and legal professionals. And these aren't just faceless institutions, they're made up of people. And when enough people inside these pillars refuse to cooperate, pull back, or outright defect, the regime starts to lose power fast. We don't need to change everyone's mind. We just need to move enough people one step away from obedience to tip the balance. A great example was when Elon Musk demanded federal workers send him weekly updates with 5 things that they did, threatening their jobs if they didn't do it. And millions refused. Workers started organizing by texting each other, organizing on Signal, saying he's not our boss. Some sent him a redacted list, others just ignored it. Eventually, unions stepped in, and even pro Trump insiders like Kash Patel told their people not to comply. The result was around 1.6 million federal workers didn't cooperate, and this is the largest act of mass noncompliance in US history. And that happens spontaneously. Now imagine what we can do if we organize non-cooperation ahead of time, if we're prepared and connected. We've already seen signs of this kind of resistance in 2025. Thousands of protests already this year, labor organizing and strike threats, consumer boycotts, mutual aid, and grassroots resistance. All of these actions weaken the regime's pillars, and history shows us that mass action is how democracy grows. From abolition to voting rights to environmental protection, none of it came about without organized resistance. Do you know somebody in a government agency, a school, a union, a newsroom, or a religious institution? That's a relationship that we can build on. Because the bigger and more connected our movement is, the more pressure we can put on these pillars, and the faster they start to break away from authoritarian control. Here's some examples of groups that make up these pillars of support. Security forces like military, police, and intelligence agencies. These are often the most crucial pillars. If loyalty shifts or cracks appear, a regime can quickly lose its ability to repress the resistance. Civil servants and bureaucracy, government workers and administrators, local officials. A regime needs these people to carry out orders, enforce policies, and manage daily operations. The judiciary and the legal systems, including courts, judges, and prosecutors. If these institutions remain independent or are pressured to defect, they can limit state repression or delegitimize unjust laws. Religious institutions, including churches, mosques, temples, etc. Religious leaders often have moral authority and can influence large segments of the population. Educational institutions like schools and universities. Teachers, students, and administrators can play major roles in protest movements, often acting as hubs for organizing and dissent. We talked about how to influence students and also teachers and administrators at universities in our last meeting. If you missed that one, definitely check it out on our YouTube channel. In the media, we have state and independent media, journalists, and broadcasters. The media can shape narratives and influence public opinion. And winning over or neutralizing bad media is key to controlling information. Business and economic elites include corporate leaders, landowners, and trade associations. When business elites pull their support, especially through strikes or capital flight, it can put major pressure on a regime. Civil society organizations include NGOs or non government organizations, unions, and advocacy groups. They can mobilize people, provide resources, and offer legitimacy to resistance efforts. And last, we have political elites and bureaucrats, like members of the ruling party or coalition and legislators. Their defections or dissent can fracture regime unity from the top. So now Morgan is going to go over some actions that we can take to start influencing these pillars of support right now.
Thank you, Tiffany. I'm really looking forward to this. I feel like this is a little bit getting back to our roots. I'm glad to see that many of you here are from outside Colorado, and a lot of what we have done have been things that you can do even if you don't live in the state. I know a lot of our more recent meetings have been a little focused on Colorado, but this kind of gets us back to some of our roots in terms of things that you can do anywhere you live and things that you can tangibly go out and make a difference doing. Many of you who've been around for a while have heard me talk about protests and what to do and what to expect. And the question frequently comes up, am I going to get arrested? As people have seen, we've had very, very few people arrested. And I always said when it gets to the time where you may get arrested, we'll let you know ahead of time before we're going to start talking about some of those things. I feel like the protests have gotten to a point that they need to go beyond just what we've been doing. And part of that is working on to dismantle these pillars of support so the regime literally will collapse without it. So I'm going to go into some very specific things, but there are things on this list that could potentially get somebody arrested if you are not careful about it. And I'm going to quote Ruth Bader Ginsburg and say, when injustice becomes law, resistance becomes duty. And because we're talking about violating laws, it doesn't mean that it's unjust, and we need to continue to do that. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is social media. I know that's not a pillar of support, and we've talked about social media before, but many of these pillars of support do rely on social media, and a social media post that goes viral or that people pass around can significantly damage any of these pillars of support. And we'll go into some more specifics about that and other things that will apply across the board. It is also unlikely that I'm going to get through all of this by 7:30. We knew that. So we may split some of the pillars up for this group and some of them we're going to do later. So I'm going to start with the pillar of support of business. Business has been instrumental in getting Donald Trump elected. Most of his money came from business interests and individuals who got rich being connected to specific businesses. So I'm going to put a link in the chat from Newsweek magazine that will give you a list of the businesses and people that gave him the most money. And this is a target list of people we want to make sure that their business is hurt because of their connection to the administration. Many of these people you've never heard of. They're individuals who have high net worths. Many of them are corporations you may never have heard of. And they're going to require different tactics to influence their behavior and what's going to be an effective strategy. Boycotts in these times aren't the same as they were in the 1960s. In the 1960s, if you sat at a lunch counter and prevented somebody from serving food to people, you're hurting their business. Donald Trump's business is, to be quite frank, less real estate and more branding. He licenses his name and his brand to companies to put on the side of a building, and then they pay him money. If they lose money, if the real estate goes bust, he doesn't care because he's still contracted to get that amount of money. And that's where boycotts can be a little difficult. But at the same time, a good boycott can go a long way in this environment to changing people's behavior. You've seen, things like Amazon and Target have already seen significant losses. Some of the owners are rich enough that they don't care, but typically, if you hurt a business enough on their bottom line, they will start to rethink what they're doing, and that's the whole point of a boycott. When it comes to businesses, one of the big things that's different is the social media, and more specifically, the online reviews. Online reviews are a big deal to companies. And if people start leaving bad reviews saying they support the administration, that is one way that you will very quickly get their attention and get them to change their behavior, disrupting the pillar of power or the pillar of support for business. Press releases. What's that got to do with businesses? If you get a significant, large enough petition or letter written by the right groups together, coming out condemning a specific corporation, and send that out to the media and it gets picked up, people will write articles, people will put it on the news, and it will have a negative impact on the business. And if they are connected closely with the administration, they will see their bottom line drop. Target shareholder value. Businesses live and die by their share price. CEOs get rich by their share price. If there are things that we can do to cause the share price to go down, that will impact businesses. And if you can tie it directly to Donald Trump and the administration, then they will think long and hard, because nothing changes a business more than an activist investor coming in and saying, you can't do this anymore. That played a large reason with why Elon Musk stepped back, because Tesla got hurt so badly by what he was doing and their stock went down so far. If we can get other companies in the same situation, you will start to see things different. This is everything from, the meme stocks. A few years ago, there was a big run through a Reddit thread on GameStop, which is a brick and mortar video game cartridge company that was on death's door, that was literally saved by individual investors buying up shares of the stock and driving the price up. It is the reason the company has not gone bankrupt yet. The reverse can be true. It is possible for people to, what's called, short a stock and make the price go down. And the same can be done with cryptocurrencies, particularly both the stock for Truth Social and the cryptocurrency that Trump put out himself. If these become worthless, all of the people who are putting money into it to curry favor with him, whether it makes money or not for them, they don't care. But if they all of a sudden find that their $1 million is now worth 1,000 because of what they did supporting him, it's going to weaken the pillar of support. Exposing corruption. Everybody knows Donald Trump is corrupt, but formally putting it into a document that says Deutsche Bank put up a lot of sketchy money for his real estate transactions. The Saudi government spent a lot of money in his first administration with Jared Kushner and currying favor. All of the people who stayed at his Washington, D.C. hotel during his first administration. His debt to Russia and Russian oligarchs, and Qatar Airways buying Air Force One for him. If you put all of these things together in a nice package that shows all of the different ways that these corrupt businesses are controlling what he's doing, and he's doing all of these things to cater to these corrupt businesses, businesses that aren't corrupt aren't going to want anything to do with it. So that's, again, just another layer of ways that you can weaken the support. Organizations like the Chamber of Commerce. I cannot for the life of me figure this out. They are the principal organization that was behind NAFTA and the free trade movement that pushed Bill Clinton to pass it and disconnect the Democratic Party from the working class. Where did that all go? And pressuring the Chamber of Commerce to stick to their values and say, what happened to your free trade stance? Because they're such a big supporter of him and the Republican Party, it may be possible to pull that support away from them by calling them out as being hypocrites. All of the industries that are being hit by tariffs right now, it's not good for them. And that may be a way that we can undermine support by saying these companies are being hurt by what you're doing. If we had a different administration or a different approach, they wouldn't be as harmed. And those businesses may withdraw their support and their large donations and may be willing to cut ties. The clean energy industry was booming under Biden. I mean, like replacing fossil fuels and generating huge numbers of jobs and huge revenue for companies in the United States. He's literally dismantling the industry as fast as he possibly can. Finally, it all comes down to making money. Businesses are in business to make money. And if you can demonstrate the administration is costing them money, or even being affiliated with the administration is going to cost them money, businesses will change their behavior. And that will undermine his support in the business community. I suppose the best way to do this would be to stop and take questions about the business pillar support now before I go on to labor. Are there any questions that people have? Comments?
I stepped away for a second. Did you mention the ICE is not welcome here window cling stickers that we have now?
I have not mentioned them yet, but thank you for bringing that up.
Yes. I'll post the link in the chat. So we designed some clear window cling stickers that businesses can put in their window to say ICE is not welcome here. And it has a QR code that leads to the ACLU page that has the Know Your Rights information in English and Spanish. So you can get them on our website and hand them out to local businesses and ask them to put them in their windows. We are ordering them tomorrow morning, so they are not made yet. So give us a week or a week and a half to get those out to you. But also because the design is not finalized, if you have any suggestions, send them tonight to me and I'll put my email in the chat.
And just to follow up on that, this is the next extension of the stickers. The whole idea behind the stickers was that we'll put these stickers out there, plaster them all over everything, and people will see that there's a movement. This is a way for businesses to step up and say, we don't like ICE and we don't want ICE here. And out in Aurora, where I am, they are going to fly off the shelves. They are going to be very popular. And one of the things we would like people to do is to take these window clings and go out to businesses and hand them out to people so that they can be spread as far and wide as we possibly can, because the more businesses that say ICE is not welcome, the better off we'll be, and the more people will know which side the people are on.
And the other resistance stickers that we have, I haven't been putting this link out because We've been getting a lot more requests for stickers than we have donations when we send this out lately. So we're just losing a lot of money on postage. But I trust you guys, so I'll put it out there. You are welcome to order them. If you can't afford to donate, we totally understand. But if you can throw in at least a couple dollars for postage, that would be awesome. But these are the resistance stickers that we want to see plastered all over everywhere. Stop signs, anything you can think of where people are going to see them and know that there is a resistance and that they're not the only one thinking the thoughts that they do.
In addition, nobody's getting paid for this. All of the money that comes from the stickers, the window clings, anything else that you buy goes back into the organization to pay for the things that we're doing. So it pays for the postage, it pays for the stickers, it pays for the shirts, but it also then gives us money to help candidates. It helps us plan protests. It helps us, get the nuts and bolts of what it takes to get things done without bankrupting our volunteers and our people. So just so you know, that's where all of the money goes when you purchase this stuff. Rod, I'm glad you asked that question because I'm going to start talking about labor and what we can do to knock down the pillar of support within organized labor. This is very hard for me because the idea that anybody in labor would be supporting Donald Trump really just hurts my heart. And it should be plainly obvious that he's not going to help anybody who is not a billionaire. But there are things that we can do, and there are ways that we can convince labor to become more involved. Labor is a vital component to any company making money. There is no company that can make money without some human labor, period. So the first thing you think of when you talk about labor is a strike. There are lots of laws in this country, and the laws supporting labor going on strike have been constrained and repealed since Ronald Reagan. But that doesn't mean we can't do it. So you talk about strikes, they need to be strikes that are going to make a difference. To be completely honest with you, if the postal workers went on strike, I don't think Donald Trump would care. But if the airlines went on strike, all of a sudden, there would be a huge disruption. If the utility workers and the grid workers, the people who climb the telephone poles to run power lines, the people who keep the transformers working, the people who keep the power plants running went on strike, what would happen if there was no electricity for a day or a week or a month? It would be very disruptive, and then they would come to the table and start meeting our demands. Large industry sectors, think of auto workers and coal miners and things that make a lot of difference in the economy, truck drivers. If they went on strike, there would be disruption. Even food workers. And I'm not just talking the Starbucks and McDonald's workers. I'm talking the people in the fields, the people in the factories, the people growing the food, transporting the food, cooking the food, distributing the food. Food disruption obviously is going to make a huge difference, along with teachers. In many places it's illegal for teachers to go on strike. Like I said at the beginning, sometimes you have to do things that you don't want to do. But a nationwide teacher strike always will get a lot of attention. And the whole point is to drive the administration to the bargaining table to meet our demands. And, that's where labor becomes most powerful. Finally, a lot of people have talked about a general strike. Because of the labor laws in the United States, particularly the pro-business labor laws, and the laws and contracts that many unions have already sign, they can't just go out on strike without a reason, without either violating the contract or violating the law. So a general strike would be difficult and complicated, but there are a lot of people calling for it, and there are a lot of groups that are working on it. And if you imagine the entire, GDP of one day of the United States coming to a screeching halt, it would be extremely disruptive. If you do it for a full week, then that would make a difference, and that would be the type of thing that would reduce that pillar of support. But specifically to win back labor, we need to start doing the things that benefit labor. And if one of our demands is that the government benefit the working class more than they have been, labor will come back to the left when they left. If we can point out that they aren't getting what they thought in exactly the same way that the people who voted for Donald Trump thinking he was going to deport somebody else and then they wind up in a detention facility, there are a lot of labor people, I'm sure, that are having buyer's remorse now, seeing what's happening with the tariffs and seeing what's happening, with the cost of everything going up. He was supposed to bring inflation down, and he hasn't. Instead, unemployment is going up. And if we give them something to be for, saying we are going to take the interests of labor into account, then labor will come back to our side because it is in their best interest, and that will remove the support from him, and they won't vote again. And it can have a huge impact in the midterms because if they voted for Donald Trump last time, if this time they come back and vote for Democrats, that can be the difference between flipping the House and Senate or not. The next pillar I'm going to talk about is faith in a religion. It boggles my mind that religious Christians follow Donald Trump in exactly the same way that we need to document his corruption. I want somebody to document which ones of the 10 commandments he's broken that are verifiable and put that out there. Because if you're supposed to be following the Bible and following the 10 commandments, what he's doing is antithetical to that. It is the exact opposite of what he is supposed to be doing, yet these people continue to follow him. How do you erode those pillars of support? It takes the faith leaders being convinced that what is happening is wrong. And that takes engaging with churches, mosques, synagogues, and faith leaders to bring them into the movement to show how his behavior doesn't match up with their professed values and their religious conviction. And yes, he overturned Roe versus Wade, which is one of the big things they've always wanted. That doesn't make him a holy person. And so we'll need to document what I'm calling his heresy and his blasphemy so that you can talk to people in the faith community on their level to understand why he's not a person that they should be supporting, and under the biblical rule that they're supposed to be following, there would be penalties for him, let me put it that way. And by that, I specifically mean things like the Epstein files. Getting the Epstein files released would then expose all of the pedophiles there he's connected to. And that is one of the things that seems to be making a difference to people of faith and making them question their support for him. I would even point out the Bible's very clear about how you're supposed to treat strangers in your own land and immigrants and others, especially since, many Judeo-Christians religions started in desert areas where, if you don't help a stranger and send them back out into the desert, they're going to die. As such, there are strong protections for outsiders in the Bible. These are the things we need to bring to the table, because then we can organize faith leaders both within our movement and outside the movement to weaken this pillar of support. It doesn't take a lot. If you're talking 5, 10, 20,000 votes in some of these swing states to get enough faith leaders to change, to make a difference. This is, as Tiffany said, one of the hardest pillars to knock down, and that is the military and the police. But it is one of the most important, and to be honest, one of the ones I am most optimistic about being able to do something about. So first, there has been a little controversy in the left movement about whether the protests should be peaceful, get permits, talk to the police, and legal, for the lack of a better term, versus the people who see the government as being illegitimate from top to bottom, therefore paying for a permit, talking to the police, and engaging with them in any way is hostile and is not sympathetic with their beliefs. I think it's very important that we maintain good relationships with the military and the police. Do not get me wrong. I believe the police have been used historically throughout the history of this country to persecute various minorities one at a time from the beginning of our country. And their biggest purpose is to protect property. And I don't think that's right. And there are certainly police officers who commit violence against innocent people and then blame them for them. I'm not saying these are good people. Some of them may or may not, but there are systemic problems with the use of violence in this country. That doesn't mean when push comes to shove, we want them on their side. If we get to our goal of 12 million people walking up to the White House demanding he step down, the military is going to do one of two things. Either they're going to shoot us and prevent us from doing it, or they're going to step aside and they're going to let us in. We want them to step aside and let us in and have a place where their displeasure can be realized and they don't feel like they can't speak out and they don't feel like they can't contradict illegal orders and they feel like they have to shoot at protesters and Americans. So it's very important that we create an environment for the military to be able to do that. And we're already seeing tactics and fractures within the military. A lot of people saw the video on the parade of the soldiers not marching in step. We've received messages that there are other people within the military. You heard Eileen talk about it a little bit earlier, that there are a lot of people in the military unhappy about what's happening. And the fact that the military structure that has existed, that has put all of these people in places of power, is being undone and undermined, not to mention what he's doing to veterans and the VA through all of these budget cuts. The VA was already underfunded and understaffed. What's going to happen now? And a lot of times, that's the only place that veterans who have served our country may have PTSD and permanent disabilities have to go to get insurance. And now they're going to be taken away from them. So all of these things need to be done to weaken that power. In addition to that, There are three more things about the military that we can do. The first is ICE, he wants to make into the new brown shirts. For those who don't know, the brown shirts during World War II were Hitler's extra paramilitary violent group. So if he wanted to go and, destroy a ghetto, he would send the brown shirts in because they weren't directly connected to the government and couldn't be pinned on him, yet they served him and committed acts of violence. He's now using ICE well above and beyond what they're mandated to do and offering them huge slush funds of money to go out and do it. And if you think it's not about going out and beating up immigrants and brown people, I've got some news for you. That's what it's about, and that's what he's trying to build. And he's using all of the money that he's cutting from these agencies to give $30,000 sign-on bonus to ICE agents. Which brings me to the next thing, the defense budget. We talked about this a little bit before, but the administration is taking great glee in cutting Social Security and Medicare, which were considered third rails of politics that were so popular, you can't do that. And cutting all of the other popular social programs that rich people don't think the government needs to be paying for so they can get big tax cuts. But what about the Defense Department? Our military budget is mind-boggling. A small fraction of that will make up for all of the cuts DOGE has made and not change our preparedness at all. I mean, there are billions and billions and billions of dollars that are out there for equipment and programs that are failed and are unsuccessful. Even if you simply cut the programs that aren't working, you could save enough money to make up for all of the cuts that he has made. And it is possible to even appeal to fiscally responsible Republicans to cut that budget. So these are things that can all be done to weaken that pillar of support. This is another long one, but you need to talk about the government. The government is most directly, after the military, what is keeping him in power. Fundamentally, the single thing that keeps him in power right now is the military threat of violence. Tear everything else away, and that is what's there. But when you go beyond that and you start talking about the government, he has systematically broken down the institutions that were made to keep him in check. So if you talk about the legislature, the Constitution has a remedy for a president who acts as a dictator and commits high crimes and misdemeanors while in office, which has been well documented. The reason he's not being impeached is because of the Republicans in the House. And that pillar of support is the only thing that is keeping him from being removed from office. Why are they doing it? I don't believe it's a value proposition. I don't think they are supporting him because they support his values. The values of the Republican Party have gone out the window. So whatever dearly held political values they ran on when they first went to Congress isn't why they're keeping him in power. What is keeping him in power is they like the racist, homophobic, and aggressive policies he has towards less fortunate people. And they share that value. But beyond that, he has them so afraid of a primary, they will fall in line with him. And this is by design. As the gerrymandering that the Republicans have been orchestrating for the last 40 years is becoming fruition, is becoming true, these Republicans are never going to lose a contested election. And they know that. So to keep them in line, the only thing they're afraid of is a primary from somebody who's even more aligned with the president, which used to mean more right wing. It just means more MAGA now. And they're afraid because they're going to lose their cushy job and insurance and need to go back to their district and lose. So how can we change that? There are two ways to do that. One is make sure that they're safe from a primary, to give them the freedom to speak their mind and break with the president. Because they can see what happened to Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney and anybody else who's crossed the president. We need to make sure that it's safe for them to do that. But even if you take it a step further, let's say you're Lauren Boebert and you're not going to change your behavior if you're safe from a primary. Well, what do you do then? Well, that's easy. And we talked about this before. There's no reason that any of us can't primary any of these Republican candidates, or find someone who can primary these candidates and support somebody who's going to speak out against the president and get them elected to these gerrymandered seats. In addition to that, the judiciary is no longer impartial. I think everybody knows that. It's plainly obvious. And since 2016, he has been appointing judges who are not impartial, and he's been appointing them specifically so that they would be loyal to him. Look at all of the cases that were brought against him where the judges were the ones who decided, when he was clearly guilty, even convicted by a jury of his peers, where they lost the case on the merits, he was able to get out scot-free because of the judiciary. This gets much more complicated in terms of how do you influence the judiciary. But even something as simple as calling for term limits, a 15-year term limit on a judge can change people's thinking. Because if you're going to lose your seat after a set amount of time, then you're going to think differently. Or a threat that the next Democratic administration comes in is going to start impeaching judges who were complicit in Donald Trump's crimes can do that. But it's important to know how the judiciary connects to the legislature, that connects to supporting Donald Trump. In addition to that, whistleblowers are going to be very important coming up. There are lots of cases where there are lying bureaucrats who are unhappy with what's going on, and we have laws that are meant to protect them when they expose it. And encouraging those, and again, making a safe space for them to come out would be a good step towards eroding that pillar of support. Yes, Tiffany.
Yeah, I wanted to drop a link in the chat. I got a little behind you. We were talking about influencing the pillar of support of like legislators. So there's a woman who, during the passage of the big bill of bullshit, created a list of the most vulnerable House and Senate seats in the country and their major donors. And she included the social media for those donors. I believe some of their addresses or links to leave Google reviews for them. So all these things that Morgan's been talking about doing, to donors to Trump, we can also do the exact same thing to the businesses that donate to these vulnerable Republicans. So I'll put that link in the chat here in just a second.
So, all right. So that leaves me with the last pillar of support that I'm going to talk about, and that is education. Education is one of those large, multifaceted pillars that is everything from pre-K to postgraduate work, all of which are a pillar of support in one way or another. So a lot of the cuts to things like Social Security, SNAP, are directly affecting families with young children and preschools. And it's affecting a lot of the grants and money that they are cutting is directly coming out of programs for daycare for young kids before they're ready to go to school. This directly affects working class people because they can't send their kids to daycare without that money. Therefore, it is more expensive to send their kid to daycare than it is to work, in which case they stop working and get on benefits, which now are going to be cut, and pointing out what this is doing to young families on top of what's already happening in the housing market and the economy is very important. And making sure that people understand these cuts are hurting children is where this ties into social media and making that this a big issue. In addition to that, some of these cuts are having effects in ways that you don't think. For example, a lot of big hospitals are connected to universities and they're connected to teaching hospitals. Those universities actually make their money from doing research. And the research is far more important than the number of patients that they treat and what money they make from treating those patients. Because a lot of times with Medicare, Medicaid, and uninsured people, the hospitals actually lose money by treating them, but are required to by law. But when you cut that research funding out, then these hospitals don't have money to give raises to nurses and pay for doctors and even keep their doors open. And so this funding, this research funding, like the vaccine studies they just cut today, have an impact that is much larger than we're not going to get a new COVID vaccine this year. And the health implications itself is a small part of the knockoff effect. How do I know this? My wife used to work at a teaching hospital in downtown St. Louis. And they just found out that there's going to be a raise freeze for 2 years after the raise freeze they had during COVID. This is not abstract. This is specifically going to be hurting these institutions and hurting other groups that rely on that research and that funding from a university level. I guess I'm at universities now, so I'll work backwards. Universities have been frequently at the center of resistance and counterculture for decades, but this now is affecting everybody from the youngest freshmen to the top administrators at every university. And all of them are being included. So we need to make sure that the administrators that are being sued for having DEI programs are willing to stand up and resist. And that means you call your alma mater and tell them you want them to have DEI in their curriculum. You want them to do this research. You want them to teach their students to think critically and not just believe what they're being told and not limit their curriculum to what the government is allowing them to say. They need to be told that they need to do what universities are there to do, and that is to educate and teach critical thinkers. And if that means you make an extra donation to your, or a donation for the first time to the college that you went to school at, then do it. If you didn't go to college, that's fine. There are plenty of other ways, even making those phone calls and supporting the protesters on campus, supporting the administrators doing that, fighting the lawsuits and fighting in for this movement on campus is the next step. You know, traditionally students in college campuses have been the center of resistance. that connection to young people has been broken because culture has changed so much. And frankly, most young people, if they get news at all, it's in 2-minute videos on TikTok and on YouTube. And we're not meeting them where they are to bring them into this movement. If you can't get a hold of the administration and you can't make a donation to get your university to do what they should be doing, help organize the students on campus to come into the movement and build stronger and bring their youth and energy into doing the things that we are doing. So it's not just all of us that have been doing this for a long time, and that will grow our movement and bring the universities in where they've been sitting on the sidelines for the moment. The primary example is, where are the sit-ins? A sit-in is a great tactic to get certain demands. So if you want your university to stand up to the administration, take over the student union with 1,000 people and sit there. And, planning that type of event can be done, just like planning an event, a protest. You need to know what you need to do, and you may never have done that. But there are people out there who can do it, and it's pretty well documented. It's the type of thing we talk about in these meetings all the time. But leading sit-ins are a good way to get the administration to buckle to your demands. We talked about it in the chat a little bit earlier. The large national resistance organizations aren't clearly communicating and organized in the way that they should be, but this can help move things in that direction if they can all have the same goals. So now I'm going to step back and talk about high schools and grade schools. The idea that it's the 21st century and we're talking about banning books blows my mind. But we are. But that's a fascist technique, because if they control the information that children can consume and what they are indoctrinated with, when they grow up, they aren't going to question authority. They aren't going to have beliefs that aren't fed to them from the administration. And the only source of reliable information is going to be Dear Leader. So it's very important that even on an elementary school level, we make sure that the teachers are able to teach children what they need to know to deal with truth in the world and be able to see what's fact and what's a lie. Otherwise, they're going to be very easily manipulated by the propaganda that the administration is using. In addition to that, this administration has made it very clear that they want to cater to their white Christian nationalist base by inserting religion into school. It violates one of the biggest amendments of the Constitution, yet they're doing it anyway. And simple resistance can be something as simple as putting a poster over the Ten Commandments if you are mandated to put it in your room, or simply not putting them up at all and make the administration make the next move in exactly the same way that we were talking about some of the universities and some of the people who were told to justify their existence to Doge. This area is ripe for that kind of resistance. And there are many, many symbolic ways that teachers can do this, and school administrators can do this. And trust me, if the teacher comes in wearing a pin, the students will know. Finally, we need to find a way to engage high school students, and this crosses over into the discussion about engaging college students. And I have a meeting tomorrow morning to discuss that. The important part is that we need to connect with young people and bring them into the movement through this pillar of education to make them part of where we are. And that will make us stronger with that diversity of age and belief. Finally, there are two parts. If you find yourself in a place homeschooling is an option. If the administration has so badly corrupted your local schools, you can pull your kids out and school them at home. What this does is it takes the money that the school is given from the state and the government per head count away. And then the schools that are most egregious and most complicit get less money and have fewer resources until they change to a way that actually teaches our kids what they need to know. And finally is an alternative teaching modality. In the 1960s, there were teachings where they would sit and teach people very much the same way we are about the things that are going on. And if the schools aren't going to be teaching our kids, we can find mutual aid ways to do it on our own. And all of these things will subvert the pillars of support that are keeping this administration in power. We don't need to do all of these things. And it doesn't need to be one pillar or another pillar that we bring down. We need to bring anything down far enough to make it impossible for the administration to stay in power and continue what they're doing. The important thing is I'm hoping that you can leave with something that you can do. And I look for very specific actions that you can take related to these things. You don't need to be in a movement. You don't need to be in a blue state. You don't need to be in a red state. I'm hoping there's something that you can bring with you out of this that will make a difference for you going forward.